You wake up. The cold has already bitten your fingers. It is still night. It will still be night for hours. You get up because you must, not because you want to. The darkness weighs as much as the cold. Your house breathes smoke. You breathe smoke. Outside, the Northern European winter does not bargain. This is no fairy tale. Castles had fireplaces. You have a hole in the floor where something burns. Maybe. Records say temperatures fell to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to glue your boot to frozen mud, enough to turn spit to crystal before it hits the ground. You drag your body. The animals stir in the corner. The fire still has embers. Today, you are lucky. But first, you need to understand where you slept. Your bed is no bed. It is hay, straw, crop leftovers piled until it's thick enough to keep you off the frozen earth. 2 feet high, gathered in summer, saved for when the cold came. You built it layer by layer, pressing air between the fibers, pockets of trapped warmth. Every morning you shake it out. Rats nested there overnight. Insects treat your sheets like a feast. A medieval text mentions a peasant who found a chicken egg under his body on waking. Breakfast in bed, literally. The straw absorbs everything. Sweat, moisture in the air, the smell of the animals. In weeks, it compresses. It loses insulation. You swap it, rotate it, add dry moss between layers when you can. A noble spent one night on such a bed. He complained for weeks that he sneezed so much he feared losing his nose. Now you need to cover yourself, layer by layer, until you can't bend your arms. Wool. You live inside it. Every spring shepherds shear sheep. You trade, buy, borrow. 20 pounds of wool per family, the weight of a small child. But this child keeps you breathing. It is not enough to wear it. First, clean, card, spin. Hours hunched over rough fiber. The wool still carries lanolin, the sheep's oil. It stinks when wet, but water beads off. You do not wash these clothes. Wet wool in freezing weather turns you into a statue. Medieval record, a peasant washed his coat in winter. The piece dried standing up alone, stiff as a board. It became a local joke, stiff as Juon's winter coat. Fleas love wool. You hang the clothes over smoke, hoping they flee. Result, you smell like burnt sheep and campfire, peasant perfume, but it works. Wet wool keeps 80% of heat. You don't need scientists. You need to survive. So you put on layer after layer. First, a linen shirt to the knee. Then, a wool tunic. Another tunic. Because one is never enough. A sleeveless jerkin. A lined cloak if you're lucky. Everything tied with cord, not for style, but so it won't slip. Getting dressed is gymnastics. A merchant's tale. A peasant got stuck in his own clothes. His wife rolled him along the floor like a barrel until he broke free. 4 to 7 layers, warm air trapped between fabrics. You look like a walking wardrobe. Walking is work, sitting more so. And when nature calls, strip, do it, dress again. Some avoided drinking water just to dodge that. Children turned into chubby penguins, rolling down hills because their knees wouldn't bend. But clothing isn't enough. You need fire, and fire needs sacrifice. Center of the house, a fire pit. Not a hearth, not a chimney. Stones in a 3-foot ring, flames licking the air, smoke rising, or trying to. 15% of the heat stays in the room. The rest leaves through the hole in the roof. That hole also lets snow in. You invented the most inefficient heating system possible. Fuel, whatever you can find, old furniture, a broken tool. The neighbor's fence that vanished overnight. No one asks. An English village record. A group burned an abandoned barn, plank by plank, all winter. The Lord did not approve. Lighting the fire each morning is ritual. You keep a live ember through the night, buried in ash. If it dies, you walk to the neighbor to borrow fire. Medieval story. A man carried an ember inside a hollow turnip, running fast to keep it alive. Villagers thought demons chased him. The smoke stings your eyes, steals years from your life, but it also drives off insects, and it preserves the roof beams. Soot built up for decades protects the wood, not in modern building manuals. Families sleep in shifts to feed the fire. Others devise elaborate ways to bank the coals. Some whisper to the flames when adding wood, believing it makes them stronger. Maybe that's smoke delirium. Now, food, the perpetual cauldron, hung over the fire all day. You throw in what you have, misshapen roots, turnips, parsnips, neeps, that sound more like a disease than a vegetable. Water, a prayer, 7 or 8 staple ingredients, all winter. The same pot, always simmering. Families added whatever appeared, bark for fiber, pebbles for minerals, leather for protein. A record mentions a family who cooked their own wooden spoon, claiming it gave flavor. But you were smart. Summer storage, vegetables in sand, cool dark places, meat salted until fossilized or smoked until leathery. Some families became specialists. 3 turnips for their secret smoking technique was a fair deal. Dried herbs hung from the beams. A walking plant encyclopedia. You knew what grew in winter, what masked the taste of 3-day meat. Poor man's pepper. A wild plant that made even a boot taste decent if you used enough. Herbs were not just flavor. They were medicine. You needed it. Given the smoke you breathed, you needed every remedy possible. At night, the family around the cauldron, gossip of the day, trying not to think about what floats in the soup. But you are not alone in this house. You share the heat and the chaos. 30% of the house's space, animals. Winter comes, chickens come in, pigs come in, sheep, even cows. Not generosity, survival math. A cow gives off the heat of a small fire. You don't know BTUs, but you know that sleeping near Bessie means waking with working fingers. Pigs, portable heaters, chickens, feathered hot water bottles, sheep, walking blankets. Of course there are challenges. You haven't known chaos until you try to eat dinner with a pig's snout in your bowl. Excavations show low barriers in houses. Polite suggestions the animals ignored completely. The night symphony, cows lowing, pigs snoring, roosters announcing nothing at 3 in the morning. You invented sleeping through noise out of pure necessity. A merchant's account, he stayed in a peasant home, convinced the rooster held a personal grudge. It crowed right in his ear every time he nodded off. But they served more than heat, an alarm system against thieves. Try sneaking past a paranoid goose, and their breath humidified the air. A damp room feels 3 or 4 degrees warmer. You didn't know the science. You knew it worked. Some made house rules. Chickens near the window. They wake everyone with first light. Large animals on the back wall. Heat reflects off the stone. A medieval homeowners association with more manure. But the house itself was a weapon against winter, and you built it by burying it. Your house is half buried. 40% of peasant homes in Northern Europe, partly underground, not a luxury basement, but raw intelligence. Earth holds a stable temperature, about 50 degrees Fahrenheit a few feet down. Science calls it geothermal stability. You called it common sense. Dig 3 or 4 feet, build the walls from there. Result, warmer in winter, cooler in summer. Medieval air conditioning. Without air, without conditioning. Materials, whatever you can get. Straw, mud, stones, wood. Some stole stones from Roman ruins. Houses that were part medieval hovel, part ancient empire. Lords disliked this architectural recycling program. But stone is stone when you're freezing. The real genius, sealing gaps, every crack, every slit filled with a mix of mud, straw, and animal dung. Medieval caulking. It worked. Tests on reconstructed houses cut heat loss by 60% and gave new meaning to "this place is a dump" door. Always one. Turned away from the prevailing wind. Not luck, medieval engineering. A small entry tunnel like an igloo. A medieval writer described it as entering through a dragon's throat. Considering the animal smell inside, not far off. Roof, the thickest sandwich in the world. Branches, straw, more branches, more straw. Sometimes slabs of turf. Some let grass grow on the roof, not for green architecture, but because roots held it together. And goats could graze up there if adventurous. A well-built house was only half the battle. To go out, you needed tools, not gear, weapons against ice. And those weapons had to be ready, because outside, winter would not wait. 6 to 8 essential tools, handed down for generations. Not gear, the gap between life and an ice statue. Snow shovel, king of winter, but it didn't look modern. One solid piece of hardwood, a wide flat end. Replica tests, moves 30% more snow per scoop than modern plastic. Of course, it weighs as much as a small child. Using it was medieval CrossFit. Thick socks were worth their weight in gold, literally. Market record, a pair of good winter socks cost as much as a chicken. They weren't basic, rabbit fur strips woven between wool layers, nature's boots. A medieval writer complained his feet got so warm he feared cooking them. The most fascinating tool, the snow marker. A long staff used to mark paths before big storms. You planted them along common routes. A smart move. Getting lost in a medieval blizzard was a deadly hide-and-seek nobody wanted to play. Records mention a village that dyed the staffs with fruit juice. Medieval GPS. Mittens. Not gloves. Mittens. Fingers together make more heat than apart. Scientists proved it centuries later. You lived it. Mittens stuffed with anything. Dry moss, chicken feathers. A creative soul made a pair stuffed with cat fur. Upcycled luxury. Tools kept at hand. Weather forecast. Read the sky and hope. But they had surprisingly accurate tells. Cows turning extra cuddly? A storm is coming. Pigs hauling extra straw? A cold snap is near. Not the Weather Channel. But it worked. You learned to read signs. Sky, animals, wind. The smell of the air. Your life depended on being right. And then you understand. This was never about comfort. There was no romance. Fairy tales lie. Castles had fireplaces. You had smoke and hope. Nobles had beds. You had straw and rats. But you survived. Generations survived. Not because they were heroes. Because they had no choice. Winter came every year. You prepared, or you vanished. Half-buried houses, endless layers of clothes, perpetual fire, eternal cauldron, animals as living heaters, tools kept like treasure. This was survival, not epic, just anonymous people refusing to freeze. Each solution came from trial and error, much error, frozen fingers, hunger, disease, but also brutal ingenuity. Intelligence born of despair, you would not be remembered. There were no monuments to peasants who rose before dawn, breathed smoke, slept with pigs, and still saw another spring. But they wrote the survival manual, one freezing winter at a time. And you, now you know the real price of every sunrise. If you would survive this, tell us in the comments. And if you want more medieval truths no one told you, subscribe. The past was not kind, but it was real.